There is a new experimental feature in Azure Storage that suits our course demo scenario quite well, and that's the new static website preview. Unlike the other authentication methods covered in this module, this feature does not use shared access signature tokens, but instead is designed specifically for read-only website scenarios, which is why I've included this feature in the security module. In this demo, we'll enable static website support on our storage account and then configure our CDN to use it. We'll also make sure our changes took effect by viewing the demo site, and of course we'll review the benefits and drawbacks. In the Azure portal, I'm viewing our storage demo account once more. To enable the static website feature, we'll choose the static website menu item here on the left. We'll flip this toggle to enabled, and once we do, some new options pop up. One neat thing the static website feature allows is setting default files including our index document name and an error document path. It's a good time to mention also that this feature does not offer any kind of server-side script support like Node.js or .NET. This is still just a plain blob storage account hosting files underneath. Let's type in our index.html file since we know we have that, but we'll leave the error document path blank since I haven't provided one. Now let's save our changes. Okay, a couple things happened here. It says Azure created a new blob container called $web. It also created a new blob endpoint. But how come? Well, it turns out this new blob endpoint is read-only. In fact, this is enforced by Azure on our behalf, which means we have an endpoint that is secure by default for our website. But now that we have a new blob container, we have to upload our static site to it. I'll navigate to the blobs area over on the left, and we'll see our previous static site container and the new $web container. Let's click the $web container and we'll see it does not contain any files. We'll click the upload button here, then browse to the folder containing all our static website files, which you'll find in the course materials, select them all and then hit upload. This will go through the normal blob upload process, and I'll fast forward here. Once the files are uploaded, we can actually go ahead and test this new endpoint. Let's go back to the storage account blade and then back to the static website section. I'm going to copy this URL since we'll need it to test and also to configure the CDN next. Let's open a new tab and paste in our blob endpoint URL. We don't even need to provide the index.html path now because, look, Azure configured the default document for us. Everything looks to be working. We can now use this new origin URL in our Azure CDN endpoint. Let's switch back to the portal tab, then go to the Azure CDN section. We can see our demo CDN endpoint here already set up from previous demos, and we could easily update it to point to our new origin, but let's start fresh again. Down in this section, let's actually choose to use an existing CDN profile now, the one that hosts our standard CDN endpoint currently. In the endpoint name, let's name it PS Azure Storage CDN Web to denote our new endpoint. Then we'll paste that same blob endpoint URL into the origin hostname. Remember, this is our new read-only static website hostname. Now let's create it, and once it's successful, it doesn't show up here in this list, huh? What happened is that because we're not using the normal storage blob endpoint hostname and instead using this new read-only hostname, Azure no longer technically associates the CDN with our storage account specifically, even though behind the scenes it is tied to our $web container. This might be something that Azure fixes in the future. Let's find our new endpoint using the search box at the top, and there it is, still created just fine, so we'll open it up. Before we test it though, I want to show you the origin properties here. Do you see how this dropdown now says custom origin? That's what's causing that disconnect in the Azure Storage blade, unfortunately. It's just something worth noting, but materially doesn't make any difference to us. You can see the rest of these properties are the same as we've seen before, just with our new endpoint now. Let's go back to the overview page, and finally, let's click on our new CDN endpoint. Hey, would you look at that? It's working just fine. So all in all, this was pretty straightforward to configure. So what are the benefits and drawbacks of this static website feature? First, I think you'll agree that it was very simple to configure, essentially just a toggle and then copying our files to the new blob container. The read-only blob endpoint means that it offers a secure by default configuration. We did not need to configure a SAS token like in other authentication methods, and neither did we have to allow public access to the $web container. Another benefit is that this feature is clearly designed for static sites, offering the ability to set a default document and error document. Plus, this is just another origin URL, so it's compatible with any of the Azure CDN SKUs offered. And finally, there's no extra cost for this feature, so it won't add any additional overhead to your bill when used with Azure CDN. There are still drawbacks to this feature though. First, again, it's only optimized for static sites. You won't be able to customize who has access to the site or what they can do. It's only available via public endpoint and it's read-only. Since this endpoint is public, it's always anonymous and could be accessed outside of your CDN. So again, this is only as secure as it is obscure, so it's not suitable if you really wish to lock down your storage account and prevent unintended requests. Since this is a special endpoint, it cannot use SAS authentication, You would need to use one of the other SaaS authentication methods I cover in this course. For that same reason, this feature is not designed to be customized much. Certainly you could customize the CDN on top of it, but only to that extent. You can't lock down the actual generated endpoint it uses by default. This is definitely more for a plug-and-play kind of feature, which suits the static website scenario well, and others less so. If you're not looking for too much overhead configuring shared access signature tokens, you might find that the static website feature suits your needs well.